The anime begins at the prestigious Suzaku High School, where rules were paramount. However, that didn't apply to all students. This is where our protagonist, Ryu Yamada, comes in, a carefree student. The teacher was angry with him, and they argued in the staff room. He always disrespected the teacher. Urara Shiraishi interrupts the discussion and hands him the class book. She was a very diligent student, the opposite of Ryu. Students whispered about him, he was always getting into trouble. High school was boring for the protagonist, and he wanted to have interesting experiences. Urara climbs the stairs, and the protagonist feels hatred towards her. He walks faster, not looking where he's going, and trips, causing both of them to fall down the stairs. The protagonist wakes up in the infirmary, thinking he had died. Something tragic happened. Ryu became Urara, they switched bodies. The protagonist rushes to find his own body while Urara is in class peacefully. Her classmates are surprised. He wasn't known for being studious. Ryu decides to talk to her privately, unable to understand how she can be calm after what happened. She also has no idea what's going on or why. She assumes they need to fall down the stairs again, as that's what led them to this situation in the first place. If you like my videos, you can support me by becoming a channel member, or you can donate me on Buy Me a Coffee. Your support will encourage me to make more videos. You can find links in the video description.
Yeah.
The protagonist proposes to Urara that they go to the stairs again, but she can't allow it. She had missed several classes due to fainting and needed to wait until classes were over. She also didn't want to live forever in his body, but the protagonist initiated the problem, so he had to accept her conditions. Ryu has no choice but to wait. He takes the opportunity to explore Urara's body, doing things he shouldn't. The high school boys notice his strange behavior and flirt with him. Ryu decides to play along and leaves. While alone, Rin Sasaki and her friends find Urara. Rin wants to talk to her and suggests having lunch together. The protagonist goes along with it and is surprised by the honorable girl's food. Ryu acts like he's starving, and his classmates laugh. The girls have to prepare for the next class. Urara checks her notebooks. Someone wrote terrible things and filled her locker with trash. Rin wasn't her friend, she was harassing her. The protagonist understands what's happening and talks to Urara during the break. The girls are terrible, and Urara apologizes to him. She didn't want to expose him to those awful things. It's best to return to normal immediately. Ryu watches her and finally understands why she's alone, all the things she hides. The treatment continues, and after class, they will return to normal. She has to go back to class, and the protagonist will make sure the girls won't bother Urara again once they return to normal. She gets angry about that. It will only make things worse. She sees Ryu and Urara talking on the rooftop, and she asks what business he has with Ryu. The protagonist can't contain his anger, tries to defend himself, and Urara intervenes, getting punched in the face. Rin is scared by what's happening. She hits him with great force and runs away. Classes have ended, and they go to the stairs. Urara confesses to the protagonist that she felt good seeing Rin running away. She thanks him. Urara is straightforward, and it's time to return to normal, or so they try. Can't return. They stumble several times, but things remain the same. Urara remembers they kissed when falling down the stairs. They have to try it. Urara takes the initiative. They kiss and manage to return to normal. Urara needs to study and leaves. Ryu is enchanted by the kiss. A student from upstairs saw what happened. They decide to try it somewhere else, wanting to understand what's happening. Go to a park alone, kiss again, and switch bodies once more. Urara says they should keep it a secret and acts very calmly. The protagonist thinks she likes him. If the truth is discovered, they could have serious problems. Urara takes Ryu's exams, and he eats like a hungry person. The boy who saw them on the stairs talks to the protagonist on the rooftop. He's going to have a date with Urara. Ryu gets nervous and says he forgot about it. He heard rumors about her and Ryu. It seems they get along well. The boys who flirted with her return and are very rude to her. The boy who was with Urara tries to defend her, but he gets beaten up. His name is Miyamura. The protagonist takes matters into his own hands, quickly beating up the three guys. They say they won't do him any more favors. Miyamura was pretending. He had seen that fighting style before. Also, she didn't have a date with him. He realizes it was Ryu. The protagonist doesn't know what to do. Miyamura knows their secret. Urara arrives at that moment and gets informed about everything that's happening. Miyamura makes them a proposal. He offers them a classroom to switch bodies in, the Supernatural Studies Club. He's the only remaining member. It's about to close. They have to join the club to be able to use the room whenever they want. Miyamura wants to know if they've kissed other people. It was the first kiss for both of them. He thinks there might be a possibility of switching bodies by kissing other people. He tries to kiss Urara, but she doesn't want to. The protagonist also refuses, but Urara forces him, and they kiss and switch bodies, then return to normal. It appears the protagonist can switch bodies with the people he kisses. Miyamura plans to find a girl for the protagonist to kiss, but Urara doesn't want that. If it becomes public, they'll be in trouble. They decide to keep the secret and attend the club meetings occasionally in exchange for using the room to switch bodies whenever they want. Urara and Ryu agree. A student hears them and wants to join the club. The boys are surprised and can't reject applicants. They have to accept her. The girl wants to know what supernatural events they're currently studying, but the club has just opened its doors, so they haven't had any events yet. The girl is enthusiastic about such things, very energetic. She's excited to join the club with them and goes back to class. Have no choice but to pretend since they can't tell her the truth. The girl returns with cleaning supplies and tells the protagonist to take out the trash after cleaning. He gets angry but has to do what she asks. He can't use the room with Urara there. They leave a notice on the wall. A group of students must score at least 80 on their exams. The protagonist asks Urara to take the exams for him, and she likes the idea. Plus, they haven't switched bodies in a while. Right before he kisses her, Ito opens the door. The protagonist continues helping her redecorate the room. Hours pass, but they can't switch bodies. He gets worried. Urara has to take her exams. Miyamura tells her to leave a registration note with the council so they can get more members. Ito leaves, and that should keep her busy. Classes are about to start, and they kiss. Just then, Ito returns and sees them. The council room is closed, so she returned quickly. She suspected something was up, as no one seemed interested in the supernatural or the club's activities. Ito gets angry and promises to get revenge on them. Several students are looking at an announcement saying he and Urara are together. The rumor about their kiss has spread throughout the school. Rin believes he's in love with her since he protected her. Ito is responsible for what's happening. She's angry at them for playing with her feelings. Urara is alone again. The protagonist talks to Ito in the club room, asking her to deny the rumors. He apologizes, but it's not enough. Ito tries to leave the room, but he stops her. She has to kiss him to be able to leave. Ryu approaches and kisses her, and they switch bodies. The protagonist hits her very hard, leaving her unconscious in the room. He has to fix things. He denies the rumor that spread, but in reality, no one believed him. Once said there were extraterrestrials in the school, but no one believed his lies. All his efforts were in vain. He quickly returns to the room to switch bodies, but Ito isn't there. He tells his companions what's happening. The boys don't understand why students have distanced themselves from Urara. She had asked everyone to leave her to study in peace. They have to find her quickly. Ito is behaving very strangely with the protagonist's body all around the school. Miyamura had searched the whole school but didn't find her. It's best to meet up and discuss the situation. They check Ito's phone. They have to deliver money at 5 in the park. Otherwise, she'll be in trouble. Ito might be there. She had bought various supernatural things and was scammed. The bullies had beaten her up, and the protagonist goes to help her. The bullies want their money. He gives back their things to them, but she bought those things to become popular in school. The bullies grab the protagonist to beat him up, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. He puts them in their place quickly and manages to recover his body while Ito was unconscious. Later, they gather in the club room. Ito apologizes for the trouble she caused. Formally, she becomes part of the club. Ito is excited and experiments with the protagonist's powers. He can switch bodies even when in another body. They start kissing one after another, switching bodies several times. Meanwhile, in the student council, they see the boys' club registration form. The council is interested in their club. Nene Odagiri tells Yushio that she will be the next president, replacing Miyamura. Apparently, the chief of the council is plotting something and wants to teach them a lesson. Ito tries to get funds for the club from the president, so they can organize activities. However, he doesn't want to support them and always keeps her waiting. Ito gets furious. With funds, they could improve the club room. The boys are fine with how it is, but she wants to add a TV, a sofa, and other things. The idea appeals to the others. The protagonist wants a microwave. He loves eating all the time. With that in mind, he gets motivated to ask for funds personally. The protagonist goes to the council with Miyamura. He enters rudely and loudly asks the president for funds. Miyamura tries to smooth things over and explains that the president is harsh with guys but friendlier with girls. However, he rejected Ito's request. Ryu tries to threaten, but the president evades the issue. They return to the club room, and the protagonist has a plan. They switch bodies, Ito with Miyamura, and the protagonist with Urara. They'll go negotiate with the girls' bodies. The boys go to talk to the president again, but it's no use. He knew the truth or suspected it. Seeing the girl's behavior confirmed his suspicions. Neither of them smelled like a girl to him. His nose was very sensitive. He wants to know the reason for their visit, accepts their request, but they have to solve a problem that worries the student council first. The top student in the school, Urara, doesn't plan on going to higher education. This affects the school's reputation. It's not due to family issues. Her family wants her to go to university. It's her decision. The president wants them to find out why she doesn't want to go and persuade her. The president will help them if they agree to the request. In a scene change, the protagonist tells Urara about his conversation with the president. She refuses. She can study on her own, and going to university isn't necessary. She apologizes to Ito and leaves. The boys can't convince Urara. They're talking outside the club room when Nene and Yushio approach. They try to annoy them and essentially declare war. Nene is competing with Miyamura for the president position and has a better chance if she can get Urara to go to university. Otherwise, her chances are slim. The protagonist realizes that when Miyamura visited the president, he had other plans, not what they thought. He wanted to help his classmate but also the council. Everyone's dreams could come true. Ryu didn't want to get into a war with the council, but he can't back out easily. The protagonist changes his mind and decides to play the game. After classes, Urara wants to talk to the protagonist. She's acting very strange. They go to the club room and switch bodies. Urara is sick, and when they switch bodies, the protagonist gets affected. Urara mentions they need to do something, which is why they switched, and the boys think she wanted to keep studying and not stay at home. They decide to go to her house to investigate. Her house seems ordinary, and apparently, no one is home. They go to her room to investigate carefully and find something that might explain why she doesn't want to go to university. The protagonist gets the boys out of the house and decides to search alone. His fever is getting worse. He lies down on her bed, and Urara arrives, angry. The protagonist justifies himself, saying he left his body with a cold. She only wanted to hand in an assignment to one of the teachers. They kiss, and they return to normal. The protagonist stays talking with her in her room. Urara was always alone. The only thing she could do was study. She wanted to rest, so the protagonist apologizes and leaves. Urara had lied. She didn't switch bodies with Ryu to hand in an assignment. She went somewhere else. The protagonist goes back, takes care of her while she's sick, and confesses that for a while, didn't want to attend the preparatory school. It seemed boring. Things started changing and became interesting. University could be the same. Ryu would try to get into university and proposes to Urara to go together. She accepts with a smile on her face. Miyamura tells the president he has accepted and fulfills his part of the deal. The boys remodel their club. They have the microwave, and everyone is happy, except the protagonist, who caught Urara's cold. The school has a field trip day, and the protagonist doesn't want to go. He's attending for the attendance. Miyamura is in Group C with Ito, and the protagonist is in Group B with Urara. They'll be separated. Urara asks the protagonist to switch bodies, so she can study on the bus and eat with her friends. They notice a change in her. She used to study all the time and didn't talk much. Urara has problems with long bus rides and vomits. They finally arrive at their destination. Urara is unwell and takes a break in her room. The protagonist goes sightseeing with his classmates, who are very energetic. After the tour, he visits Urara to see how she's doing. She's better in studying. The protagonist decides to grab a bite to eat and wonders why she came on the trip since she's been studying all the time. Urara's classmates return and suggest taking a bath together. The protagonist rushes to find Urara but can't. They need to hurry. The bathroom schedule is set. The protagonist ends up taking a bath with them. He's exhausted and can't sleep well. Her classmates are happy she joined the trip as she had never attended one before. Ryu wants to know why she came. She tells him she always wanted to go but didn't know what to do. That's why she switched bodies with the protagonist. Ryu is angry. Her classmates want to chat about girly things all night. He kisses her and they return to normal. He has to spend time with her friends, and the protagonist is hungry as Urara hadn't fed his body. On the way to the dining hall, Nene asks the protagonist to accompany her. She formally introduces herself as the vice president of the student council. Ryu gets to the point and wants to know her intentions. Nene shows him some secretly taken photos, where she was searching through Urara's bag. It was actually Urara when she was in control of her body. Nene blackmails him. He must prevent Urara from taking the national evaluation exam scheduled for the next day. The protagonist tells his friends about the situation. Miyamura knew Nene wanted to cause harm. She gained points with the president when Urara agreed to go to university. If she doesn't take the exam, the school's results will suffer. That would make the school lose value in the eyes of the president. However, this doesn't make much difference in their rivalry. Nene won't delete the photo easily, and if the protagonist agrees, she won't stop extorting them. Ryu could tell Urara to defend him, saying he was looking for underwear in her bag. However, that's not possible. Her reputation would be affected. He plans to switch bodies with Nene. He approaches her in her room, and they go to the park to talk in private. The protagonist is direct and plans to kiss her. Nene is surprised but nervous. She accepts. Before they kiss, she gives him a suspicious warning. Ryu is shocked. They kiss, but they don't switch bodies. Nene leaves with a smile. Something strange is happening. He thought Nene was special, but it seems he can't switch with everyone. Ryu talks to his friends. Miyamura kisses him to test, but they don't switch. Ito does the same. Nothing happens. It seems the protagonist lost the ability to switch bodies. The next day, the field trip continues. They're having a barbecue in the forest. Ryu continues thinking about what's happening. He must tell Urara. Just then, she arrives with a plate of food. She wants to eat with the protagonist. Ryu tells her about what happened with Nene. Urara isn't worried. She can skip the exam. She needs to be more careful since someone is spying on her. Ryu was going to tell her what happened with his powers, but she interrupts. She's happy about the trip and spent the whole night talking with her friends. She wants to go on a summer trip with all the club members. Ryu thought it was best not to tell Urara about his powers. The day of the exam arrives, and he doesn't show up. That would slow down Nene a bit. However, he wouldn't know if she fulfills her end of the deal and deletes the photo. He arrives at the club room. Ito and Miyamura were waiting for him. They brought him breakfast and were acting strangely. They had fallen in love with the protagonist. It all started after the kiss on the field trip, right after kissing Nene. He had lost his power to switch bodies, but now he could make people fall in love. He kisses them again, and they return to normal. He wonders what would happen if he kisses Urara. She doesn't know about the change in his power. She initially joined the club to switch bodies with the protagonist. Since that wasn't possible, she thought she could stop attending. They planned to hide the truth from her until Ryu regains his powers. Ryu needed to see Nene to figure out what was happening. Just then, Urara arrives at the club. She wants to switch bodies. The protagonist doesn't know what to do, and Ito intervenes, excusing the protagonist. Urara will have to wait until lunchtime. Ryu is looking for Nene, but he can't find her anywhere in the school. Urara keeps insisting on switching bodies. The protagonist avoids her and makes her feel uncomfortable. He wonders if she's no longer interested. Nene had a group of admirers in her favor, known as Nene Odagiri's elite guard. They pledged absolute loyalty to her and leave. Yushio arrives. He plans to damage Miyamura's reputation. Yushio hates Ryu for kissing Nene. He could have resolved the situation. Nene has a plan. Thinking that the protagonist is in love with her, they hide in the old school building and decide to come out for the protagonist to find her. She doubts whether the spell has taken effect. The game takes an unexpected turn. Nene can't stop thinking about Ryu. It seems she's the one who fell in love. Ryu tells Urara the truth, and she's relieved. She thought she was a burden to him. The protagonist apologizes. Urara wants him to kiss her. She knows about his new powers. He does it, and they manage to switch bodies. Apparently, there's a special connection between the two of them. Urara tells him not to kiss Nene again. Nene and Yushio are spying on the protagonist and see the kiss. Nene leaves. She realizes the spell didn't affect her and is crying. Yushio understands the situation. Urara explains her theory to the protagonist. The power to make others fall in love belongs to Nene. It didn't affect him because he had the power to copy, and at that moment, he also had the power to switch bodies. Their powers got reversed, and the power to switch bodies actually belonged to Urara. Ryu had been using his power all that time. Yushio can't contain his anger and surprises the protagonist with a kick to the face. He can't get over what happened to Nene. The protagonist and Yushio have known each other for a long time. The protagonist used to hang out with him, but when he changed schools, he decided to start anew and take his own path. However, they couldn't fit in with others, so they got back together for a while. But then Yushio distanced himself from the protagonist. Urara intervenes in the fight, explaining what happened with the kiss. Ryu needs to kiss her again to set things right. The protagonist refuses to help them. They both caused harm and extorted him. Yushio apologizes and says he'll delete the photo and prevent her from participating in the elections. Ryu refuses, but Urara decides to accept. It's not right, and Urara punches the protagonist in the face. Her anger is directed at Yushio, not Odagiri. They need to return to normal. Ryu decides to do the right thing. They need to meet after school in the same place. Yushio had kissed Nene and knew he was under her spell. He accepted the switch. He used to get into trouble with the protagonist and used to fight a lot. When they changed schools, they decided to leave that behind. Until he met Nene and betrayed the protagonist's trust. He got blamed for a fight he tried to avoid. He got suspended. The entire club attends the meeting. Nene knew Miyamura's secret. The rivalry escalated. Odagiri wanted to be alone with the protagonist. She thought about him all day, neglected her studies, and when she found him, he was kissing Urara. Nene tells the protagonist she doesn't want to return to normal. She has mixed feelings and wants to continue this way. But the protagonist remembers Yushio's love for her. He kisses her and does the right thing. As they leave the room, Yushio hands the protagonist a book, The 7 Wonders of Suzaku High School. It belonged to his club and was found in the old school building. Apparently, there were students with strange powers at the high school. They were referred to as witches in the book. The powers they discovered in the first volume were cultivation and telepathy. The rest were in the second volume, which they hadn't found. Ryu was the only person immune to the witch's spells, but he didn't want to keep getting into trouble. Urara tells the protagonist that her life changed since she met him, just like Odagiri's did. The protagonist blushes and agrees. The other witches were waiting for him. The search was about to begin. Ito invites them to join the club, but Nene refuses. Her behavior was different from theirs. Yushio doesn't apologize to the protagonist for the fight that changed both of their lives. Summer had arrived, and the club members decided to go to the beach to have fun. Miyamura asks about the protagonist. Ryu had to stay at school to take supplementary exams. There were 3 students in the protagonist class. He tries to socialize with them. It's a group of intellectuals. They all failed the exam and had to retake it the next day. After the exam, the protagonist meets up with his friends. They couldn't enter the club room. The teacher took the keys away before vacation. Still hadn't found the second volume. Urara switches bodies with the protagonist so she can go to the beach and have fun while helping him with his exams. Urara supports one of the guys in the class. They ask Meiko Otsuka if he can join their group. Lunchtime arrives, and Otsuka is very shy. She talks to Urara and asks if they can be friends since they're both in the supplementary classes. Urara accepts, and to seal their friendship, Otsuka kisses her. Club members gather, and Urara tells the protagonist what happened. She doesn't want to switch bodies again. They want to know what her relationship with Meiko is. Meiko is in Section C. She likes to read manga, and she has bad grades. The protagonist has never kissed her, and there's no doubt she's a witch. When the protagonist kisses Urara, they don't switch bodies. When 2 witches kiss, it has no effect. They were unaware of her power and that she was targeting the protagonist. Urara needs to analyze the situation before acting. That's why she doesn't want to switch again. Meiko apologizes for the kiss and warns the protagonist not to be surprised by what's about to happen. She didn't know her spell had no effect. While they're taking the exam, Meiko's nose starts bleeding, and they all fail. The protagonist talks to his friends. They haven't found any relevant information yet, and they still don't have the second volume. Nene says the teacher from the supplementary classes has a copy of the keys. They need to pass the exam to get the keys. The protagonist has to kiss Meiko to find out what she's planning. Urara switches with the protagonist and convinces Meiko to kiss her again. The protagonist goes to the agreed upon place, they kiss, and then he meets up with his friends. They all kiss the protagonist, but nothing has changed, or so they thought. When the protagonist falls asleep, Meiko contacts him. He thought it was a dream, but his power is telepathy. She asks him to meet at 6 p.m. for training. She'll be waiting at the back entrance. They meet, and Meiko's personality changes when she uses telepathy. She tries to teach the protagonist how to use his ability. He can share thoughts with everyone he kisses. They plan to cheat on the exam, and they hope the protagonist will help. Ryu tells his friends that Miyamura had mastered telepathy and decides to help them all with the exam. Manage to pass. They get the keys and enter the club room. They don't find anything. The room had been remodeled several times. The things that were there are now trash. They didn't find what they were looking for, but at least they discovered a witch. It's the last day of vacation, so they decide to have fun. The only person who could have remodeled the room was the president. The protagonist was able to see his friend's insecurities and desires when he used telepathy. He assumes that the witch's powers come from something they desired. The protagonist doesn't know what his desire is, so he decided to find all the witches to discover the answer. A week after vacation, something terrible happens. Ryu goes with Miyamura to Maria Sarushima's house. She's the next witch. Nene's group was investigating her on their own. They help her remodel her room and she falls asleep in the living room. The protagonist tries to kiss her to discover her power. When he's close to her, she whispers for him to help her. The protagonist asks Miyamura to leave them alone. Sarushima has the power to see the future. The protagonist doesn't believe her. Everything is fine until one day, she sees the old school building on fire. She was responsible for the fire in that future, which is why she decided to lock herself in her house. In the vision, the protagonist was with her and was blamed for starting the fire. She didn't want to meet the protagonist, but the future doesn't change that easily. She knew he would look for her. Ryu kissed her. He wanted to understand her powers. Nene knew she was a witch. The protagonist tells his friends about his powers and about the fire. They need to find the real culprit. The protagonist can see himself in Maria's future predictions exactly as Maria does. Urara explains what she has understood so far. She sees the future from the perspective of the person she kisses. Ryu realizes that there was someone else in the fire and Maria confirms it. She kissed her friend right before that happened. The protagonist decides to look for him to get information. Kentaro Tsubaki was the person he was looking for. He finds him and they go to a cafe to talk. Kentaro confesses that he was in love with Urara, the only girl who ignored him. He asks the protagonist to set up a date with her and Ryu agrees. Kentaro goes with the protagonist to the old school building to show him one of his hobbies. They enter the cooking room and Kentaro prepares food for the protagonist to seal their friendship. Ryu has no doubts. He believes that Kentaro is responsible for the fire. Ryu tells his friends about it. The fire would happen at night. He can see the future again and it shows him meeting with Maria and Kentaro. He'll try to change the future. Urara doesn't show up for the date. The protagonist asks Kentaro to kiss him but he refuses. Miyamura tries to help but they end up forcibly taking Kentaro. However, Kentaro is very strong and beats them up. Their plan doesn't work. Maria knew that she would fail. She goes to the club room and Ito kisses her and tells her everything. She meets Ryu's friends. The protagonist switches bodies with Urara and meets with Kentaro. The future vision indicates the time of the fire. The protagonist has to keep Kentaro occupied during that time. He goes shopping with Kentaro and Maria calls him. The future isn't changing, it's getting worse. Miyamura has a plan to postpone Kentaro's love confession. Ryu tries to implement the plan but Kentaro insists and shouts his confession. Urara intervenes, comes closer and kisses the protagonist right in front of Kentaro, making him believe that they're together. Urara complicates things and Kentaro runs to the old school building depressed. The protagonist follows him and kisses him after Urara distracts him, changing the future. The boys celebrate. Kentaro wants to join the club. Maria talks to the protagonist privately, thanking him for everything. She confesses that Urara switched bodies with the protagonist to avoid being blamed for the fire. The protagonist is shocked. Ryu talks to Urara, expresses his concern and she smiles before leaving. Nene talks to the boys and realizes Maria's power a bit late. The cultural festival is approaching and a mysterious girl is excited about the news. The boys need to stop 3 troublesome freshman students to secure a place in the festival. Keigo Shibutani, Seiko Fukasawa, and Ren Asano are the targets. The most important one is Noa Takagawa, the next witch. The president Haruma Yamasaki knows everything about the witches. They got their powers within the school. Noa probably has the 2nd volume as they were cleaning the room during vacation as ordered by the council. The protagonist needs to stop Noa to secure their place in the festival and get the 2nd volume. Ryu talks to Noa and the protagonist tells her that he knows the whole truth. Noa pretends she has nothing to do with the troubles caused by her friends. She flirts with the protagonist and Ryu plays along, but she's just joking. She leaves. The protagonist tries to kiss her several times but she refuses. She suggests that he joins her team. She heard a rumor about something they were planning and wanted to be a part of it. However, Noa doesn't trust him. Ryu tells her he knows about the witches and her attitude changes. She enters a room with him, tries to kiss him, and in return she would tell him about the other witches. The protagonist stops her, changes his mind and rejects her. Noa leaves angrily without saying a word. The protagonist fails. Noa keeps her friend silent due to her power. She uses them, ordering them to destroy the protagonist club and stealing the first volume of the book. Ryu gets angry and threatens the president. He wants to know why she's collecting the books. If she refuses to cooperate, he won't help her anymore. Haruma tells him that Noah wants to eliminate all the witches in the school. The girls who receive powers are those who are experiencing some kind of problem or concern. Noah looks for students with complexes, selects her victims based on their past, and wants her friends to inherit the powers to turn them into witches. She already had 2 volumes of the book handling more information than they did. Girls could be in danger. She warns her friends and they plan to set a trap for Noah and her henchmen. Miyamura had a plan. The protagonist switches bodies with Urara staying alone. Seiko forcibly kisses him, calls her friends, but the protagonist easily defeats them. They didn't know that Ryu had taken Urara's body. They capture the troublesome students. She wanted to get Urara expelled. The boys learn that Noah wasn't forcing her friends, they were doing everything willingly. They decide to take them as hostages to stop Noah. They switch bodies with Noah's friends. The protagonist tells them to forget the plan to expel the witches in exchange for their release. She refuses but then decides to negotiate. She offers the first volume in exchange for her 3 friends. The protagonist refuses and Noah doesn't accept it either. Miyamura proposes to captivate them using Nene's power so they would be on their side. Seiko gets scared, agrees to forget the plan and tries to convince Noah. She doesn't want them to lose their friends. Ryu emerges victorious, angering Noah. He kisses her for her to understand his truth. Noah's power allowed her to dream of other people's traumatic events. Noah had suffered terrible traumas, but her classmates were unfairly blamed. They didn't cause the problems, she wanted to help them. The protagonist understands Noah's feelings and reconciles with her. He suggests that they continue their lives away from her so they won't be seen as troublemakers anymore. Keigo appears and surprises the protagonist with a punch. He was angry, nobody believed them, but it was actually his fault for lacking character and causing Noah's suffering. She is touched by the protagonist's help. The boys receive their reward. Noah falls in love with the protagonist. Urara believes that he has a hidden power that he hasn't discovered yet. He changes people's hearts. The club opens during the festival with its yakisoba bread and clairvoyant stand. They use Maria's power to see the future and they sell all the bread because of it. Ryu talks to Maria and she wants to eliminate her powers. She dreams of falling in love but can't find a partner if she sees the future. The protagonist visits Shinichi Tamaki. He wanted his help to remove Noah's powers. Noah talked to him about the protagonist. Tamaki could steal witches' powers. Currently he had the power of the last witch he kissed. He demonstrates it to the protagonist, hiding completely from people he kisses. He couldn't help with the protagonist's friend. If he kissed another witch, her power would override and disappear. Ryu insists and Tamaki kisses him, but his spell doesn't work on the protagonist. Tamaki tells the protagonist he's a witch hunter. He proposes a deal with the protagonist. He wants to be the next president. Ryu needs to see the future and find out who his successor will be, then tell Tamaki. This way he would help Maria. Ryu visits the president. Asuka Makoto is with them, his assistant. He asks about his successor but can't tell him. Nene kisses the protagonist before going to Hamura so she would have him on her side. She also wants to know and tries to forcibly kiss him, but Asuka knocks him out with a kick. The protagonist wakes up and Asuka makes him speak. He tells them why he needed the information. Asuka releases him and decides to help him. She also sought the president for the same reason. She erased his power and it now belonged to Tamaki. Asuka is a witch. The president couldn't help the protagonist. He hadn't decided who would take his place yet. He tells him to search for the 7th witch. Whoever finds her will be the next president. Nene starts searching on her own. Tamaki still couldn't remove Maria's power. They needed to find the 7th witch first, and then Tamaki would fulfill his part of the deal. Ryu tells Maria to wait, thanks her and kisses her. He sees the future. Tamaki removes her powers. He becomes the president and Urara becomes his secretary. The protagonist starts searching for the 7th witch along with Miyamura. He wants to prevent Urara from leaving. He has fallen in love with her. Miyamura finds a list of students who caused problems in the school. The witch could be on that list, so they start their search. On the other hand, Miyamura asks Kentaro and Ito for help in getting the presidency for the sake of everyone. An invisible someone enters the room and overhears their conversation. Urara wants to know why he's searching for the witch. She tells him to let her know when he's ready. Tamaki is waiting for the right moment to act. Nene thinks he's given up, tells the boys, and the protagonist senses that something's off. He kisses them all. Miyamura, Ito, and Kentaro are all under the effect of his power. They realize he had been eavesdropping. Ryu suggests using the body swapping to deceive him. Urara would switch with him. He was nervous and couldn't do it himself. Urara had to take the initiative and kiss him. The protagonist couldn't keep hiding the truth. He tells Urara about the future vision. In that version of the future, Urara had the same expression as before the body swap. Ryu didn't want her to feel that way again. She understands the protagonist's actions, but she doesn't intend to go back to being the same as before. For that, the protagonist had to change the future.
The boys gather, and Tamaki was hiding in the room, eavesdropping. They still haven't found the seventh witch. However, Miyamura didn't mention that his sister was in her third year at the school. Maybe she knew something about the witch. She stopped going to school because of the seventh witch. They went to talk to her for information, but Leona Miyamura wasn't in the mood. The protagonist forcibly kisses her, and they switch bodies. Leona gets angry with her brother for getting involved with the witches. Ryu tries to blackmail Leona while controlling her body, but it doesn't work. Protagonist begs for her help. Ryu tells Leona everything that's happening. In short, he was looking for her to save the girl he likes. Leona agrees to help, but warns him that the seventh witch was very special. She would prevent him from seeing Aurora again, or at least not in the same way. The protagonist would be in danger if she found out his identity. He would lose all memories of the other witches. Leona had been hiding from her. She barely managed to escape, but her partner investigating with her wasn't as lucky. However, the protagonist decides to accept. Ryu tells his friends, since he would lose his memory, they need to talk to him again about the witches and integrate him into the club. His friends agree. The protagonist tells the president the identity of the seventh witch, Rika Saionji. He already knew her identity and was testing the protagonist's abilities. He keeps his promise. Miyamura will be the next president. He needs to be careful with the seventh witch. If something happens, the president could help him. He returns to his body, and Aurora wants to be the first person to kiss the protagonist if he loses his memory. Ryu thought it was all over, but while he's alone, Rika appears before the protagonist. She's very perverted, takes off her gloves, touches the protagonist's face, casts her spell. They didn't need to kiss. She leaves a note with spell precautions and leaves. The spell will take 24 hours to take effect. If something unusual happens, he needs to go to the council. After the agreed time passes, the protagonist doesn't lose his memories. However, when he visits his friends, they'd have lost their memories. They'd forgotten the protagonist. Ryu visits the president, explains that they had to take measures since witch's powers didn't affect him. The school rules dictate that only the president can know the identities of the 7 witches. They need to protect the school's order. Hammer apologizes to the protagonist. Tamaki remembers the protagonist. He's also immune to his power. He proposes an alliance to overthrow the president. All the problems stem from him. Tamaki was spying on the protagonist while he was with Rika. She discovers it and uses her power on him. The whole school has forgotten Tamaki. Tamaki did what the president ordered him to do, erased Asuka's powers, all for the position, but he was deceived. Aurora talks to the protagonist. When she went to the club, she wondered if he wanted to join. She invites him, but he declines. She smiles kindly. The protagonist asks her out, but she's in love with someone else. Ryu doesn't give up easily, starts looking for the person she likes. Ito tells him it's probably Miyamura, since the accident that initially involved the protagonist got distorted with him. He wants to recover Aurora's memories. He talks to the president for help, but he has more serious problems. The witches who forgot the protagonist have returned to how they were, even worse. Ryu changed them. His presidency is about to end. He's busy. They leave, and the protagonist talks to Neen. He knows Aurora rejected him, and she offers to help using her power, but she only wanted to benefit herself. The protagonist decides to copy her power and make things easier with Aurora. He kisses her in the courtyard. Right at that moment, Aurora sees them. She runs off. The protagonist apologizes to her. Aurora acts as if she doesn't care. Ryu thought of telling her the whole truth about what happened, but she insists she likes someone else. However, she can't hold back her tears and wonders what the protagonist did to her. Ryu tells her the whole truth, but Aurora doesn't believe him. She doesn't remember being a witch. The protagonist tries to kiss her, but Aurora hits him. However, he manages to cheer her up. She was crying constantly, and the club members weren't meeting like before. The power affected everyone more than they had imagined. He needed to recover his memories as soon as possible, or they would drift apart. Tamaki suggests thinking things through calmly, as he had been rejected twice by Aurora. Ryu kisses Miyamura and falls in love with him, but that doesn't help. He returns to normal. Tamaki tries to make progress on his own, but both of them are failing. Adagiri is furious. She kisses the protagonist since she used her powers against him. She looked for him in the club, but everyone was acting strangely. Nin had regained her memory. The protagonist's kiss breaks the spell. It only works with witches. When he kisses Miyamura, everything remains the same. Nin doesn't understand anything. The boys explain everything that happened. The protagonist is very happy to see that Nin has remembered him. He blushes and leaves. Nin releases Ushio from the spell, but it doesn't work because he's truly in love with her. Nin realizes she can't get what she wants using her power, including the presidency. She decides to stop relying on her power. Upon discovering the way to return the other witches to normal, Rika appears unexpectedly. She explains why nobody knew the name of the seventh witch. If someone gathers them all, any wish can come true. She uses her power on the protagonist again. Ryu tells Nin over the phone to be on alert. The president knows she has regained her memory and will be the next target. Nin doesn't want to leave the protagonist alone. Just as she's about to confess something important to him, he interrupts, saying he will fix everything. The next day, they realize that Nin hasn't lost her memory. Rika discovers her power doesn't work twice on the same person. She tells the president, and Hamura decides to finally end the protagonist. Nin has the keys to a private storage room at the school. They decide to talk there to hide from the president. They know about the ritual of the 7 witches, but they still don't know how to use it. Nin remembers being called to a certain place a year ago, where the 7 witches were gathered. Nin can't remember that moment clearly. It's the key to remembering everyone's memories. They decide to recover the witches' memories and then meet for the ritual. The council has acted ahead of them, posting a warning about a student soliciting kisses. If they find the students involved in those acts, they'll face severe punishment from the council. The school day ends, and Aurora asks the protagonist if the warning was about him. She saw him kissing Nin, and then asked her to kiss him. She had suspicions. Ryu refuses and only says he had a good reason. He asks her to accompany him home and tells her that Miyamura will leave the club. He was chosen as the next council president, but turned it down because he'd be too busy. The protagonist decides to help Aurora. He'll do everything he can to make everyone stay. Aurora asks the protagonist to kiss her. Nin finds the place where the ritual was performed, and the president surprises her, proposing a deal. Ryu tries to kiss Aurora, but Asuka stops them due to the council's warning. Hamura asks Nin to stop the protagonist, showing her a photo of the protagonist trying to kiss Aurora. The president knows Nin has fallen in love with Ryu. If they join forces, they can fulfill their desires. Tamaki secretly spies on them. Nin suggests restoring the witches to normal in order. The first would be Maria. Tamaki wants to know what's going on and saw Nin talking to Hamura. Nin tells him that she can fulfill any of his wishes, but he needs to help them stop the others. He refuses, but Tamaki doesn't believe her. He knows her love isn't reciprocated. She shouldn't stop the protagonist. Ryu kisses the other witches. Only Rika and Aurora are left. They make a plan for the ritual, but the problem is getting Rika on their side, not to mention how dangerous her power is. Nin looks for information about her, but doesn't find anything anywhere. Nobody at the school knows her. It's time to date Aurora. Ryu is excited. On the other hand, the president has something in mind. The boys receive an invitation. They have to meet at a location ordered by the council. Attendance is mandatory. Nin tells them that they need to gather all the witches and organize everything before the council meeting. They only have 3 days to come up with a plan. Ryu goes to the club and asks Aurora to kiss him. Meanwhile, Rika appears to Nin and Tamaki. Rika tells them that when she erases people's memories, they eventually forget her too. That's why she's practically a ghost. Nin asks her to join them, but Rika refuses. She tells them about the president's plans. He plans to get rid of Ryu once and for all. He's the only student they can't control. This way, the council will lose its purpose. Asuka took the initiative and kissed Aurora before the protagonist could. Kissing her wouldn't accomplish anything. Ryu gets angry and goes to the president. He informs him that Asuka has been suspended because she was caught kissing someone within the school premises. She's not allowed to be visited as per the council's orders. The protagonist declares war against the president. Ryu looks for Miyamura to gain access to Asuka's house. Leona sees him from the window and enters the house. She tells him what happened. Nin and Tamaki visit Leona. They needed her help. Tamaki was also invited to the meeting. They assume that Asuka's power can be returned to the original witch, and the president wants Asuka to regain her power before the ritual. The main priority is to defeat the 7th witch. The president and she are connected. Miyamura doesn't know who the protagonist is, but he's happy to make his sister smile. Ryu talks to Rika. He wants to know her relationship with the president. She only says they are connected by a special bond. The protagonist tries to turn Rika against the president since he hadn't told her about Asuka's plan. The president was only using her. Rika gets angry. She feels lonely and abandoned. The president was the only one who supported her. Nobody else knew about her existence. But that had changed now. She agrees to help the protagonist but asks for Leona in return, so her memory can be erased. She's the only one who knows Rika's identity. Ryu refuses. Meanwhile, Leona is in her room looking at a photograph. She's with President Hamura. Leona wants to talk to Ryu. She knows Rika hasn't forgotten her. Leona was responsible for everything that happened. She was in the Supernatural Studies Club back then, It was just the two of them. Her partner Hamura ran for president to keep the club alive. They were investigating the witches. When they discovered the seventh witch, he protected her, and as a result he lost his memory, completely forgetting Leona. When he became president, he learned about the witches again. Ning suggests trying to reason with him, but it wouldn't work. Leona plans to accept Rika's conditions. The protagonist doesn't want to allow it, but Leona can't bear to see her friend like this. It's best to forget everything. Rika uses her power on Leona. She pities Rika. Before leaving, she decides to visit Hamura. He doesn't recognize her. She wishes she could reunite with him, saying that Hamura bursts into tears. The girls manage to catch Asuka. On the other hand, Ryu and Miyamura go to Asuka's house. The protagonist talks to Aurora, apologizing for not listening to her. She was scared, but everything will return to normal soon. He will take care of it. Aurora returns to her body. All the witches gather at the ritual site. Tamaki returns Asuka's power to her. They decide to start the ritual before the president can interrupt them, but it's too late. Asuka is released, but she's not willing to cooperate. The president arrives and tells them he didn't know why he became president. He felt immense pain in his heart thinking about it. He didn't understand. He focused on his work to try to forget, but it didn't work. Rika erased his memories, but not his feelings. Hamura wanted to remember why he became president. He decides not to intervene and leaves the rest to the protagonist. The ritual begins. The world stops for everyone except Rika and the protagonist. She instructs him on what to do so his companions regain their memories. The protagonist wanted to know if Rika was happy with her power. It wasn't easy for her. However, the council didn't leave her alone. She adapted. She cared about her successor. No one would want that. After the ritual, Ryu heads to the club. His friends have regained their memories. They celebrate Ryu's return. However, he has something important to tell them. He gathers all the students who know about the witches in the club. Ryu tells them about the wish he made during the ritual. He didn't wish for them to regain their memories. His wish was for the powers to disappear from the school. After experiencing the 7 powers, he reached that conclusion. He changed his friends' lives. Aurora apologizes to Ryu for not fulfilling her promise. She was supposed to be his first kiss if he lost his memory, but it wasn't her fault. The protagonist confesses his love for Aurora, and she also confesses her feelings. She's in love with him, they kiss, and they don't switch bodies. The powers have disappeared. Ryu Yamada's life has completely changed. And that's the end of the video. Don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.